Hey guys, welcome back to Surreal Beauty. I'm Tiffany, and today we are talking about practicum, what the experience has been like, graduate school, getting my master's. Let's really talk about it. I'm really excited because I get to bring y'all on this journey with me. I talk about just the ups, the downs, like the reality of making this thing happen, making it work. I'll even share some insight on how I even prepare for exams, assignments, projects, and things like that. Because one thing I will say is time management is something that's really big. And so if some of y'all didn't read or watch my first video rather, where I kind of break down the process of what it looks like to get your master's and obtaining your license, there's a couple steps that one has to follow. And so the first part of it is the schooling process of grad school, and now as I'm entering into the latter half of it, which is like your internship, practicum experience. And so I actually just fulfilled my practicum experience this past fall of 2024, which, if anyone doesn't know, that's basically just like, I can't even think of it of an example, but maybe getting through a really intense level in Call of Duty, something like that. I don't know. But yes, like I want to talk about that experience, what it was like, because honestly, it's not daisy and roses. While some people have positive experiences regarding their internship and practicum, some people have experiences where they're not so great. Honestly, either way, I will say that however you are challenged during your journey, take it on head on. And it's definitely put there to challenge you, but to also ultimately allow you to grow in some way, shape, or form. So my practicum experience started back in this August of 2024. Classes started, I believe, August 19th. And so you have so it was from August 19th to December 6th of 2024, where we had that time span to get that 100 hours. And as I kind of talked in my last video, with practicum, you need 100 hours. 40 of those hours are direct client contact, and the 60 hours are indirect. So yeah. And so basically the practicum is kind of like the pre-introduction to internship. Internship is a lot more intense, a lot more vigorous. You are definitely getting full throttle, hands-on mode with working with clients from the moment you do an intake up until discharge, right? So my experience, I was actually at a site. It was an inpatient rehab facility. Now, mind you, I personally don't have experience or have dealt with addiction, and definitely don't have any immediate family members, at least, that deal with addiction. And so I say that to say my practicum site, I was in a population of addicts in recovery, right? I want to be mindful of the words and stuff like that with my word choice, because I don't want to say anything that's offensive or comes off a certain way, because I do know now with a lot of the updates, like with the terms and the way we use words or how we even diagnose, we have to be a little bit more conscious and about when we're doing that. And so I was working at an inpatient facility, and honestly, when I first started it was just my job. It wasn't my practicum experience as of yet at that time. So I had started that job this year, 2024, but in January. My practicum experience actually didn't start until later in August. And so I basically had to, or actually I was given the opportunity to gain experience. I mean, I was running group sessions. A lot of the sessions that I did run were group. And by that meaning, instead of doing a one-on-one counseling session where it's just me and one other person in the room, it was a classroom of at the very least 4 up until like 16. Sometimes if we doubled up, it would be about like 40 of them, to be honest. So basically when I applied for the job, I was like, okay, I've never really done that. There was like different positions that they were offering. I just took the one that paid the most, and it was basically to be a counselor associate. So when I started the job, they kind of gave me material, they did some training, but it was one of those things where you kind of learn as you go. I did have my supervisor, so she definitely did help out, and we met on a weekly basis. And every week that I met with her, I was able to just talk about some of the frustrations or the confusions that I may have been having, any challenges, and just like how to like navigate through situations, how to implement interventions, how to handle a client that's dealing with crisis. So you have your supervisor, someone who's been in the game for many years. They are more equipped and are in a position to where if you do find yourself in a situation where you are stuck or whatever, you need that wise counsel, you go to your supervisor. And so I will say I was very thankful for the position. I was thankful for her, my supervisor meaning. And so when I started like my job there and I just started working, I will honestly say this is before I started my practicum experience, right? So now I'm just working there. I'm learning, I'm picking up on, okay, I got to teach this class, anger management, right? Okay, got to teach this class, parenting, right? Social skills, life skills. Because again, what I started to realize was that a lot of these individuals, once they kind of check into rehab and things like that, depending on where they're at, a lot of them kind of lost their flow and rhythm with life or routine, right? So they kind of have to get back on board and on track with society and just like getting their lives back together. So I was blessed with the opportunity to not just work with females, but I also did work with men. Very challenging. I will definitely even talk about the differences because honestly, there are huge differences working with men and working with women. So when you're working with men and working with women, what I started to realize eventually was that the way you approach your teaching and just even counseling are different, right? So a couple things that I'll just off the head that I noticed, not immediately, but I think gradually, I noticed that when I did groups with women, women are more inclined to open up. Women are more inclined to talk about their feelings, just, how, like vent, right? Women are more inclined to just really speak openly about their traumas and things like that, right? And I noticed that with men are not as inclined, or not saying that it's impossible and not saying that they don't. It's just they're not ones to, oh yeah, let me tell you this, let me tell you that. They don't do that. I noticed that in order to get certain information out of them, and not say that I need to pull it out of you, but again, sometimes when we need help, especially as a man, it is hard for men sometimes to open up and say that. It is hard for men to disclose and express their feelings because I do believe that we live in a society where men are conditioned as young boys to just suck it up, be tough, having feelings is soft and it's weak, it's perceived as weakness. And so I think that as men grow up, they kind of bottle those feelings and emotions in, and don't necessarily have a healthy outlet to relieve that. And so that can actually manifest and result in unwanted, undesirable behaviors, like substance abuse, right? Maybe violence, aggression, anger, a lot of things like that. So what I noticed, like the difference between men and women was women were just like, oh yeah, girl, open up, let's talk about it. It's like kumbaya. I mean, I couldn't get them girls to just, like time was up, like an hour and a half was up, and I'm like, oh my gosh. So that was the difference I would say with women. It's easier for them to open up and kind of get them going, whereas men, you really have to be creative with how you get them to engage. And so certain things that I started to realize, like, okay, one of the things I would do is do a quote of the day. I would find pertaining, okay, so let me just back it up a little bit. So I would do a quote of the day, and the quote would pertain to the lesson that I had to teach. So there was a lesson plan that I was instructed to teach each day. So the quote that I picked out, it related to that lesson. And so, I mean, we've had lessons from like I said, life skills to sexual health, to mental health, to spiritual health. I've had so many conversations with these clients, like it was absolutely amazing. But yeah, so I noticed that if I did things like quote of the day, and I like put a quote up that was like pretty cool or just had you thinking, that would kind of get the conversation going. I actually have cards here, but they're not here. Another thing that I would do is I would have like card games, or like, how they have like mindful cards where each person, they pick it up and they read it, whether it has like a word on it, a saying, and then they'll share it and then kind of talk about how they reflected on that quote, saying, statement, things like that. So I would just do little mini icebreakers that helped. So yeah, I would say that was the main difference. But yeah, so a lot of the experience before I even started my practicum was running group sessions, running individual counseling sessions, parenting sessions, anger management classes, classes that I really did think once upon a time that I wasn't really qualified for, right? But it was like one of those things where you don't want to not take the job that's paying you good because you think that you're not, no. Take the job, move forward, right? And then you kind of figure it out. And so honestly, I did go through a phase where I was very nervous. I did feel insecure. I did feel inadequate. I mean, I even got questioned, like, are you even an addict? Are you a recovering addict? Because I do know that my coworkers at the time, a lot of them were recovering individuals themselves. And so some of them had like maybe 2 years of recovery, 5 to 10 years of recovery. And then here I am, kind of more of like the textbook, concrete, smart. So there was definitely just judgment thrown at me, which was actually odd because a lot of the saying and the slogans or the themes with recovering addicts is, to not judge and things like that. And what's crazy, I remember one time I was in class with the ladies and someone had asked me if I ever had any experience with addiction, and I kind of was like, no. And then the question was responded like, well, how would you be able to help us? And then one of the other actual girls was, one of my other clients had said, how they always tell us not to judge? Like, let's not judge Miss Tiffany. Why do we feel like we can judge her or that we should judge her? Because, and it was like one of like that moment of, for me, and then even the person that the client was saying it to, where we kind of was like, aha moment, like, she's right. It was very fulfilling, uplifting for me because it's so true. While I do think that having firsthand experience in addiction can definitely go a long way, I also do believe that someone who may not have had like firsthand experience in addiction, I don't think that you should rule them out completely, because while addiction or substance abuse addiction, while that may not have been, that's a tongue twister, that may not have been my struggle, but I understand struggle, I understand trauma, I understand hurt, and a lot of those clients and individuals, all what they had in common at the core of their foundation: trauma, unhealed wounds, brokenness, fear. I mean, the list goes on. And, that's what I started to realize was, well, I know what trauma was like. I definitely engaged in unhealthy behaviors for sure. I operated from a place of my trauma and my brokenness. I definitely lived a lifestyle once upon a time, and I engaged in things and behaviors that maybe I'm not so proud of, and maybe I justified it then because I was operating as my broken self, right? So those were these little things I started to pick up and realize as I started to hear more stories, as I started to ask more questions. I just was very transparent about my lack of experience with addiction firsthand. I was never someone who acted as if I knew everything that was going on. Even if I took my test and I took the class, it was still a student's perspective and position. And what I realized was taking that standpoint of a student, and being transparent, being authentic with the clients, they actually received me well that way. And actually they were more inclined to like, you don't understand that? Let me break that down to you. You don't know what that, I learned some things I didn't want to learn. Some things I'm like, I just couldn't fathom that some people would literally subject themselves to certain things. But then again, right, no judgment, I had to think about things that I did, right, that were not healthy to my well-being, and maybe someone else looked at it, you know, the same way I was kind of looking at those things too. So I would say that that was the approach that truly helped me, was pulling from a place where I could truly relate and pouring from that perspective. And I think the ability to do that, it really allowed me to kind of bridge that gap a little bit more. So yeah, that was actually like one of the positive things that took place. And so now as we kind of venture on to my practicum experience, there were so many things I would say that affected my experience. One, I will be blatantly honest. I'm an African American woman, right? And I was primarily in a location environment where it was predominantly or is predominantly Caucasian. I'm no longer there, by the way. As I tell you the story, you will understand why. But yeah, I was in a predominantly Caucasian area. And to be honest, I mean, some of these folks were so kind of outdated where I don't even think they've really been around people outside of their race and culture. It was very evident on their facial expressions. It was very evident in some of the things that they would communicate. It was very evident in some of the phrases and remarks that were made, comments that were made that were very, discriminatory, very disrespectful, belittling, and just honestly, I would just say like immature, because, you know, I think at some point we kind of have to understand and realize like the world is just bigger than you and me. There's more to the melting pot, but I would say it started to become an issue with that very early on, mind you, but I didn't want that to defer me from the process and the journey, because I'm like, no, I'm not gonna let little challenges make me uncomfortable or run away the moment something is being said to me, right? So I held it on. I honestly kept my mouth shut when I would hear a lot of, like, let's say the racial remarks, the racial slurs. I even started to experience like bullying, and I don't want to say bullying like people were pushing me around and stuff, but just lying on me. They were creating false narratives and reporting it to like the higher ups and my supervisors, creating stories that just did not exist. And I started to become like, just, I would say that there's a word, uninterested. I started to become uninterested. I started to become less interested in showing up. Now it went from I'm really passionate about doing this to like, dang, like, you know, now I feel like not only do I have to be on guard for like my clients because they might say something, but also like my coworkers. It just started to become more of a hostile environment where someone was always trying to pick a fight, or any little thing that I did off, you know, it was just someone was ready to just and I really didn't like that. It definitely wasn't a feeling of camaraderie or like friendship, community. It just seemed like everyone was against each other. And I'm someone like, I'd rather just work alone than work with the drama and the BS, to be honest. So those were some things that started to happen. But then I remember there was this one moment where a client stood up in the middle of the classroom and made a racial statement. And I remember in that moment, because, you know, you're not thinking that that's going to happen, you know, especially like when you ask a question to the client and it's on the topic of the lesson, and then someone kind of literally stands up, makes the statement, and you're like, okay. And honestly, in that moment when it happened, I did black out for a second, where my mind kind of was like, you know, when something happens, you're like, did that really just happen? And your mind's trying to process it as quickly or whatever. So I couldn't really come back from that. It was kind of like, okay, class dismissed, whatever. And at that point, my coworker, who was actually filling in for, she decided to yell outside of the classroom so everyone could hear, because I let the classroom go early. She decided to yell in front of everyone, like, I mean, why I let class go early, and that class shouldn't have been let go early. And I just didn't like her tone. You know, she like immediately, initially, the way she kind of came off was not someone who, it definitely had me on defense. It definitely made me feel like I had to like defend myself. And had she had to just talk to me and ask me and just, you know, had a conversation, I would have let her know like, hey, like, this is kind of what's happening. This is kind of like what went on. But because she went about it a certain way, I felt like I was more on defense mode, and it was just kind of like us like kind of going back after one another. And that was pretty much for me the last straw, to where I was like, you know what? Maybe this isn't the best place for me. Maybe I should just, and what really sealed the deal for me was when I did go to my supervisor. I did go to the higher ups. I did go to the chief, right? I went to all these people or reached out. We probably had like one meeting where that was supposed to be my opportunity to speak, and then we were supposed to have like a follow-up meeting where both of us, me and the coworker that kind of like had the quarrel, to kind of find a resolution. That never happened, right? And then pretty much after that, like, there was just no plan to ever like find a resolution. And my last day there, I was actually leaving the site, and my car shut down in the middle of the road. Literally shut down in the middle of the road. I'll save all the semantics, but I'll just say that just was my last day there. No hard feelings or anything like that. I was able to find another supervisor, another site to fulfill my practicum. And so I was able to really get through it. But that, my friends, that's a real story. And honestly, practicum for me personally was very scary. There was a moment where I just was like, is this even gonna work? Am I even gonna pass the grade? Am I gonna even finish? Because like my last day, when I was not physically able to get back to work, I still had to fulfill my practicum experience. There were still things I needed to do, but yeah, I don't have this site no more. So now it became, well, you got to find a new site. You got to find a new practicum site. That's where I started to get worried, right? That's where things, So that's where things like started to go left. Like I really started to get worried, because now I'm at a point of, I think at this point, so remember I said practicum started, which also classes started August 19th. This happened September 17th. I even remember the day like this happened yesterday. So because I was working full time as well as going to school. So let me kind of break down obtaining clinical hours. So I needed 100 hours to fulfill, and I was granted the opportunity of being able to work, get paid at the same site that I had to accrue my clinical hours. And so some people, when they're doing their internship, they have to work their full-time job, and then they also have to go to their internship site and accrue hours. So that's where it becomes really challenging, where you have to really be more mindful of your time management and planning. Because let's say you're someone who, I don't know, let's say you're the manager at Walmart and you work a Monday to Friday shift or whatever, right? And now you have to do this internship site. So let's say you work 8 to 4, or I'll even make it even better. Let's say you work part-time. So you work like a 6 to 1, right? 6 to 12. Then after you leave your job, now you have to go to your clinical site and then spend the other half of your day, and you don't get paid. Now, if you do find an internship where you can get paid, God bless you. So I was in that situation, hence why I told myself, regardless of what people say, regardless of whatever rocks are being thrown, we're going to finish and we're going to follow through. I'm just going to finish all the way through. I'm going to finish my practicum and my experience. I'm not going to let no one deter me. And then it just like literally like with my car shutting down, this is actually what happened. I reached out to staff. I reached out to my boss like, hey, car shut down. What's crazy also, when my car did break down as I was leaving my work site, like my head boss drove me home. So she knew about the situation. My car wasn't making it up or anything like that. Do you know the day after when I reached out to let them know, or even I specifically called that boss that dropped me off, she never answered. Like to this day, never responded to no emails, never responded to like nothing. I remember reaching out to the whole crew saying, hey, is there any way I can get any support with just getting transportation, or is there anywhere I can do like a remote type position, training, whatever? It was like crickets. You would think that I was working for them at that point. It had been 10 months. So, or 9 to 10 months, something like that. You would think that the way that I got no response, I hate that my phone is, not my phone, my chair is squeaking. I apologize. But yes, so you would think that with the no response that I got, that like I did something wrong, that I was in trouble, that I was probably the most hated person. But like, Like not even. And it was very like heartbreaking a bit because it's like, dang, like it just showed like people just don't care. And that was just what I had to accept. It was nothing personal. I guess it was just an unfortunate situation and I got the short end of the stick. And now I'm left to figure out how am I going to complete my practicum within a timely manner. So now this is September 17th. Classes don't end until December. I still have a good 3 months to go. I have no practicum site. I have no supervisor. So I'm panicking. Now, my next thought was, let me reach out to my supervisor, not my supervisor, my professor. Let her know what's going on, let the head clinical director know what's going on, the board, just kind of like inform them sooner rather than later so that they understand and kind of like what advice can I get to move forward. And so I talked to my professor and I, bless her heart, she gave me a grace period where she said, listen, find a new clinical site and just don't worry about anything else, you know, just get you a new site. It took me 2 months to finally find a new site. And when I tell you it was, I eventually reached out to a colleague and asked if she knew of any sites that were taking on interns. Now, the reason why it became a slippery slope, because even though I had accrued my 100 hours at that site, I still needed to gain experience to fulfill the class because you need to get evaluations, things like that, right? And you got to finish the class. So I went a good portion of that looking, searching. I was still working, you know, little gigs and temporary jobs. So I was still building experience and things like that, but I just wasn't getting that clinical experience. I was eventually able to get in touch with a colleague and she had asked me, why don't you go to the counseling center on campus? The thought never crossed my mind. We can save that for another video as well. Just like my whole process of even becoming, right? So the thought didn't even cross my mind. And then I just did. So I reached out to the counseling department at school, the counseling center. And then lo and behold, I called the site supervisor or the clinical director there, or at least she was the clinical director at the time. And her name is Tiffany. And I don't know, maybe that was God, like, hey girl, you know, I got, you know, I don't know. But I will say, like, being that I was towards the ending of the semester and not that I really needed hours, I just needed a supervisor to take me under their wing. A lot of people weren't willing to do so. And it's not that they were being mean or anything like that. It's just to really find someone who has the time because, you know, people are busy and things like that. Like their schedule's only so much. It was like almost impossible. So now my professor's like, hey, Tiffany, like by this deadline, because there was a certain date, right, to where she was like, listen, at this point in time, if you still can't find a supervision site, you're going to have to repeat the class over. And I'm like, repeat the class over. Wow. That's when the anxiety started to kick in. That's when it started to get real rough. That's where I started to feel pressured, anxious. And the old self, my unhealed version of self, whenever I'm placed with opposition, such as the one that challenged me in practicum, the old self would flight, right? You have that fight or flight response. The old Tiffany self would flight, would run away, would say, oh, well, I guess I got to take the class. You know, would not even put up a fight and try to see, like, is there someone who would be willing to take me, you know? I decided and I told myself that I am going to find a supervisor. I'm going to find someone who would be willing to take me on, and I'm going to finish this practicum class. It literally came down to the boiling last minute, and I really think when I had made that call to that clinical director, Tiffany, I really think after when I had that conversation, when I put the phone call out there and I was like, hey, told her my situation, and then like, my name's Tiffany. And it was so funny at the end of our call, she was like, does it sound weird saying your name after you're talking? And then we just kind of started laughing. And I don't know, there was something positive about that moment where maybe because our names were Tiffany, we kind of bonded in that little moment. That kind of gave me the green light. I don't know. I don't question God. But thankfully, a week later, she called me in for an interview and I was interviewed by her as well as 2 other directors, right? And then, yeah, it was intense. And I was able to get the position and I was able to finish my practicum experience. And what was best, like what was fulfilling about it was I was able to work with the student population and I was able to see, which is completely different from addicts in recovery, by the way. So I just immediately loved how, I don't want to say easy, but it just the energy and the positivity with this new site, right? With these new networking group of people, the aura, that it was just a completely, it was a game changer, it was a shift. I absolutely loved it. I just felt like people were much more responsive and open. And also, it's on the school campus, on a higher education, in the higher education atmosphere, it's more diverse, more cultural. And so someone of my color, it's not too far-fetched to see someone of my color walking around, thank God, right? Maybe of my height, I am 6'3", for y'all that don't know, but not. So I would say that was a huge thing. And there was some adjustments I had to make, but honestly, overall, I am thankful that I was able to find my new supervisor. He is awesome, by the way. I was able to fulfill my practicum experience, and honestly, guys, it came down to that one last moment, and I just had like that mustard seed of faith, and I still made the call. I even followed up with the call when I was told by Tiffany she was going to get back to me. I followed up, didn't hear back, followed up with an email, followed up with my school advisor, like, hey, this is what I'm trying to do, and one day I just got the call back, and it just kind of worked out. So yeah, I kind of feel like I went in a circle with that. But I was able to finish my semester strong. I was able to finish the class, don't have to repeat it. And I think when it hit me the most was the last day of class, which was on December 5th. And I remember the last half hour of the course, my instructor had each of us go around and say something positive and encouraging about a peer classmate that we wanted to, and everyone kind of picked one. So when someone said, like, they gave me the word, and my word was strength. That was the word she described for me. And because I had shared and I had been transparent about what my practicum journey has been like, a lot of the unfortunate situations I experienced. And when she had hit me with, like, Tiffany, I feel like you have a lot of strength, and you showed that throughout your semester with all the trials and tribulations, because that's what it definitely felt like. And honestly, guys, like, when she was saying those encouraging words, I started crying. I definitely started crying. I didn't think that it was going to hit me. I didn't think I was going to cry. I didn't think I was going to get emotional. And everyone's looking, and it's okay though. But I think in that moment, that impact of the reality hit me like, you did it, because getting through practicum is no joke. Getting through grad school is no joke. I'll talk about the intensity of that another video. But to hear those words and to finally like reach that finish point and say, I did it, I finished, you came, you saw, you conquered, truly a stamp in the book type moment. And I am so excited. I think it really truly compelled me to, like, I want to talk about this. I want to document this. I want to share this experience. I want to share this journey, because as I'm on my way of becoming a helping professional, I'm learning new skills, interventions, modalities, evidence-based theories that I want to use. What population of clients do I even want to work with? It's so much. But guys, I am so excited for my next videos. I have so much coming in for store. Stay tuned. Until next time.